Final 2025 college football playoff predictions just a few hours before the first week 1 game kicks off. I want to start off discussing some teams who just missed my playoff bracket and also some teams who could make the playoffs that I had missing out. So I believe that Nebraska, Georgia Tech, LSU, and SMU are going to field strong teams. Some other teams that I believe will be strong but outside of the playoff picture are Louisville, Indiana, Notre Dame, Florida, Oklahoma, and you could probably go on and on. Before we resume this segment, please take a few seconds of your time to make sure you have liked the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell for the channel and for any team podcasts and playlists linked in the description, and also comment your thoughts down below in the comment section and join my Discord server via the description. All of those things I just asked you to do are completely free, and they sign you up for things related to my channel, or they don't sign you up for anything. No cost to you, and all the benefit to you because we release daily college football content here on College Football with Sam. If you want to support the channel monetarily, sign up for a YouTube membership, or check any other links in the description for my merchandise store and Patreon page. Thank you very much, and let's get back to the segment. There's a lot of teams, because the playoff is so big, the schedules are so imbalanced, and yet a lot of the teams that have those tougher schedules, Florida, Oklahoma, would wish I could say Wisconsin, but I just don't think they have the players to exactly win 8 or 9 or certainly not 10 games with that schedule. There's so much unknown as to what the new playoff committee rules and how they will enforce those rules or guidelines, and so much unknown as to how in a year with all-time low returning production and consequently all-time low experience and all-time high roster movement in the portal, more quality players are staying with their teams, but you still have backups and quality players in general, maybe not your all Big Ten or all SEC players, are leaving their schools, even smaller ones, but high-level G5 players, backups at all schools at all levels, are still moving around. The portal is still very active. So this season has been said by many as a chaos season, and I agree with that in many respects. I think this year is going to be another weak year like last year. Won't exactly be the same, and I'll get into that as these playoff predictions go on. But I do have Notre Dame losing 3 games. A&M is another team who I had previously making the playoffs. Now I don't, but at 9-3, they're just on the cusp there. I really like what Elko is doing in recruiting, development. More importantly, I think he's an amazing A-grade coach. Nebraska I have going 10-2, but being kept out of the playoffs because I believe they'll win a bunch of one-score games. I think their average margin of victory for the season is going to be around 7 or 8 points. That will be held against them, especially when I believe that in one of their losses they are going to get absolutely destroyed by a team in Happy Valley named Penn State. Georgia Tech has a 10-2 record as well, and Nebraska I have projected to beat some quality teams such as USC. Obviously with Cincinnati in the non-conference, you're going to have somewhat of a non-conference quality win. Georgia Tech I think will have an ultimate quality win in Georgia, who, hint, hint, yes, I have reaching the playoffs. You'll have to figure out where. I do think that Georgia Tech probably drops one of the big games to Clemson or Georgia, and probably another game here or there in the ACC. I have it being to Duke right now on the road. LSU, I think that week 1 game is going to be very fascinating. I certainly have them losing to Alabama later in the year, and whether it's Texas A&M or South Carolina at home, Florida at home, or Oklahoma on the road, I just think there are 3 losses with that team and the roster that they have. SMU I actually have going 10-2. They have a pretty strong non-conference schedule. That's why I have them in that second 2 out. Indiana is, I would say, the 5th team out of here, and I actually have them at 10-2 as well. A lot of 10-win teams that I think will be vying for this playoff. That's going to force the committee to really look at strength of schedule, performance in big games, and non-conference schedule. Indiana's non-conference schedule is an absolute joke, so even though I would power rate them above these 4 teams that are just missing, they would not be ranked ahead of any of them because their non-conference is weaker, and I think their best win is going to be worse than any of these teams' best win. SMU plays Baylor in the non-con. Baylor I actually have as the Big 12 runner-up, so that would be a quality win. They also play TCU, and I have them beating Louisville, who was a team I mentioned who would also be a 10-9 win team and therefore a quality win. Those are my first two and second two, so really my first four out of the college football playoffs. I'm really confident that Nebraska and Georgia Tech and SMU are going to do well. Have less of a read on LSU, but I think there is enough talent there to be competing for the playoffs. Nebraska, I'm just confident in the Matt Rule Year 3 formula and Dylan Raiola, but if they're going to reach the playoffs, it will be through a lot of close games and more losses happening to the top teams than I expect. Moving on to the road teams in the first round of the college football playoffs, so seeds 9 through 12. We have Boise State at 12th, Boise State being the Mountain West champion. I have them with an 11-2 record. I think they will drop a game, whether to USF or maybe to one of their other Mountain West Conference games. USF's a non-con. You also play Notre Dame on the road. I have them dropping that game. I still think they're going to be viewed due to preseason bias rankings and also the G5 just being weak overall. I think they will be the G5 representative in the playoffs. We have Utah as the 11th seed. Utah here, I love what Kyle Whittingham does as a coach. They're one of the best developmental programs in the nation. They may have the two best tackles in all of football. I know for sure that Spencer Fano is one of the best, and some have him going in the first round of the NFL draft. You also, though, have to pay attention to, for Utah, Caleb Lomu at tackle, and they just have so many good players. Devin Dampier, for example, Wayshawn Parker, Lander Barton at linebacker. I think they're in for a rebound year, a big rebound year. I have them winning the Big 12 with a 10-3 record. We have Texas as the 10th seed. I have Texas losing to one of Florida or Ohio State. I'm predicting them to lose to Ohio State, but if they win that game, I think then they'll probably drop to Florida. I also have them losing to Georgia, and I think that depending on who they rematch with or match up with, darn it, I revealed that they're going to rematch with Georgia in the SEC championship game. They could win, but they could also lose. I think Texas has some holes in their roster that they'll clean up as the season goes on, but there are some questions that I have about them. I think they're going to be power rated much higher than this. They're better than all the teams we've talked about so far by a comfortable margin, including 9-seed Miami. But they do have a tough road slate, and it's not like Texas A&M at home or Oklahoma Neutral Field is going to be easy. And if they play Georgia in Atlanta, which I think they will, well, I don't know. Atlanta's going to be more of a Georgia home game. If they play Alabama in Atlanta, I think Atlanta would be more of a home game for Alabama. I just think that the way the SEC championship game works and where it's located, and also who Texas is at this point, a lot of upside, but less depth than they had last year overall, means that I think an older team like Alabama or a team in Georgia who's just recruited better and had Texas's number is going to get it done in Atlanta. Number 9, we have Miami. Miami's the ACC runner-up with an 11-2 record. Texas is 10-3 is where I have them as. So the only 3-loss participant in the college football playoff, and really 2 loss in the regular season. They just lost the SEC championship game, bumping them down to a 10-3 record. Miami, I think, is a very undervalued team. I like them to go 11-1 or 10-2 in the regular season, yet again, or build off of last year. They will drop a game due to Cristobal's coaching and the fact their roster is not quite as complete as Clemson or several SEC and Big Ten teams, but they do have a top 10 roster and will be a top 10 team in my mind. Moving on to the home teams here. This is a very jarring list. I personally have questions about my own college football playoff rankings as I look at this, and I say that because I have USC, Ohio State, Alabama, and Michigan as the home teams in the first round, all with a 10-2 record. All of them. All ahead of an 11-2 Miami, all ahead of a 10-3 Texas, and no duh, of course they're going to be ahead of Utah and Boise State. but there's a lot of debate there. And keep in mind that Nebraska, Georgia Tech, and SMU, I also have at 10-2. They're out, and yet Michigan, Alabama, Ohio State, and USC are in. Some of that might be due to brand bias, for sure. I also think those teams will analytically be superior to SMU, Georgia Tech, and Nebraska. Usually will have better wins and tougher strengths of schedule as well. I have Alabama at 10-2, losing to Georgia on the road, splitting that South Carolina, Auburn, those games right there, both road games, both against teams that have a lot of talent in specific areas. South Carolina, the quarterback position, Auburn, really everything but the quarterback position. I think that Alabama will miss Atlanta. I think some people are much too high on them, but I also believe that with Kalen DeBoer bringing Ryan Grubb back into the fold as his offensive coordinator and some players they have on defense, on offense, Caden Proctor on the offensive line, Ryan Williams and Jeremy Bernard and Isaiah Horton making up an elite wide receiver room, I think that they will generate offense on top of defense. Talk about Tim Keenan III, who should be playing in parts of this season. Qua Russo, also Deontay Lawson, Bray Hubbard. There's a lot of good pieces for Alabama. So I have them matching up against Miami, hosting the 9 Hurricanes as the 8 seed in Tuscaloosa. I have USC as the 7th seed. 10-2 record. They will beat Notre Dame on the road. I also have them beating Michigan, but I have them losing to Nebraska and losing to Oregon. So 10-2 record for the Trojans. They'll win a lot of one-score games, close contests like Nebraska, but often in a more dominant fashion. So even though Nebraska has that head-to-head, USC having that tougher non-conference, more impressive non-conference win over Notre Dame, having that win over Michigan that Nebraska doesn't have, and I think overall just looking like a better team will get them in the playoffs over a team such as Nebraska. They will be hosting the 10-seeded Texas Longhorns. I think that D'Anton Lynn's going to field a top 20, if not top 15 defense this year, and it's going to be the same with USC's offense. They'll rebound after having a down year under Riley last season. At 6th, we have the Ohio State Buckeyes. I think that in their big games, Penn State, Michigan, and Texas, they will win one of those games. Going with Texas here, I think that, the Michigan problem's the Michigan problem, and Michigan matches up better with them roster-wise and schematically than they did last year, which is very easy to believe. Michigan was not a good team. And I also believe that Penn State is going to be one of the best teams in the country. You know my thoughts on Penn State if you've watched the channel. If not, just sit tight because you'll hear them very quickly. I think Ohio State's going to win one of those games, though, and I'm going with Texas. 10-2 record, lost to Michigan, lost to Penn State. They could lose some other games. I think that Ohio State, Notre Dame, Alabama, and Texas are very likely, or more likely than many people think, to miss the college football playoff in its entirety. For a while there, I was actually picking Ohio State to miss the playoffs, but then looking at the Texas-Ohio State matchup, I changed my mind for a variety of reasons, and now here I am saying that they're going to be in the playoffs, and therefore they're going to get a home game if they have 10 wins, and one of them is against a good Texas team. Michigan is the 5th seed. Michigan will lose to Oklahoma. They'll lose to USC. They will be a worse team power ratings-wise than Alabama and Ohio State, but 8-4 Oklahoma will be good. 10-2 USC is a playoff team. They'll beat 10-2 Nebraska, who will have a resume of a team just outside the playoffs or a road playoff team, and they'll beat Ohio State at home, which is the best win that any of these teams that we've talked about so far have, outside of maybe Georgia Tech over Georgia, and they'll lose to a Duke team who won't be probably anywhere close to Oklahoma and have a weaker strength of schedule and weaker metrics overall than Michigan. I love Bryce Underwood. I love the defense that they have. That's a big part of the reason why. Between them and Ohio State for that 5 and 6 seed, I think it's pretty interchangeable. I think that in the format I have, they would definitely get the 5 and 6 seed. Ohio State's much more talented and the better team overall. I mean, Caleb Downs is quite literally 2 or 3 people on defense. They have wonderful athleticism at linebacker. Jeremiah Smith's the best receiver in America, and I think Sayan's going to be a top 10 quarterback at the end of the year. And I like Ohio State's tackles, love their tight ends. There's so much to love about them. Michigan doesn't have that quite strong of roster, but the head-to-head win, getting them at home, having a quarterback in Bryce Underwood, who I think will be top 15, top 10, maybe even better than that at the end of the year, and also a defense that I think is going to be top 10, could flirt with top 5, and a wonderful kicker, is going to help them build a resume with the schedule they have. It's not the strongest schedule in the world, but it's tougher than many of the teams who got left out, and that signature win against Ohio State is going to do a lot for them. Let's move on to the teams who received a first-round bye. Conference championship game participants exclusively. The only team that would be an exception is if you had multiple 11-win teams in the same conference, and due to tiebreakers, one of them got left out, and then they jumped the loser of the conference championship game. Or if you were Notre Dame, because then you're not in a conference. I have Oregon as the 4th seed. The Oregon Ducks I project to go 11-2, losing 2 times, once in the regular season and once in Indy to the Penn State Nittany Lions. Love Oregon's offensive line, starting offensive line. I think that their defense is very young, but very talented, and if they can be coached up and gain experience throughout the year, it will become a very deep unit overall. Same with the offense, minus maybe wide receiver due to injuries, but I think Brycen Moore is going to be an All-American with 1,000 receiving yards, and Dante Moore is going to be in that Julian Say and Bryce Underwood conversation where they're all going to be bunched together and there's going to be a huge debate as to who's the better quarterback. Oregon's schedule is harder than Michigan and Ohio State's, and I would say even USC's in terms of travel, but they don't play, I would say, more than one great opponent throughout the year. They avoid Michigan, they avoid Ohio State, they get USC, but they get them at home, and I don't think USC will be power rated as highly as most of the teams that reach the playoff. I'm picking them more so due to great coaching and Riley having a winning history in close games and kind of how their travel schedule plays to their advantage. At number 3, we have the Georgia Bulldogs at 12-1, SEC champions. I like Georgia to be the second best team in America when it's all said and done. Does not mean I'm picking them to reach the national championship game or win it all. I think that they are going to be very consistent. Their identity is going to be strong. They will improve in rushing offense, passing offense. I think they will turn the ball over less. I believe their defense will improve compared to where it was last year. It was outside the top 25 in numerous categories. And injury luck was so bad for them that I think they'll regress to the mean and be healthier. And they only have 3 true road games against Tennessee, Mississippi State, and Auburn. Almost forgot that. But that's a very forgettable road slate, if we're being honest. Georgia should be double-digit favorites in all of those games. Number 2, we have Clemson. Clemson is going to be undefeated here, 13-0. I think a big part of the reason why is they will out-talent everyone on their schedule by a significant margin outside of LSU. And if they play Miami in the ACC championship game, which I'm projecting them to do, you'd also add Miami to that list. To have a massive talent advantage, power ratings advantage, and coaching advantage in 11 out of your 13 games, or 11 out of 12 if we're not even talking about the game in Charlotte, is massive. And I think they have a huge coaching edge over LSU, and I'd give their staff a slight edge over Miami, and I think Dabo Swinney's a better in-game coach than Mario Cristobal. So I like Clemson to win all of their games here. Is it bold? Yes, because mathematically it's very unlikely for a team to go undefeated, but I'm picking Clemson to do that because I believe Cade Klubnik's the best quarterback in America, and Clemson is the best overall defensive line in America. At minimum, it's a top 5 unit. You go on to Penn State at number 1. I'm very high on Penn State to a degree that I am uncomfortable with. I think that this team, by this point in the season, so Selection Sunday, this is what the bracket will look like on Selection Sunday, in my opinion, they will be viewed as the best team by a significant margin. They will be in their own tier. I think that the way they will dismantle Oregon in both of their matchups, especially the 4th game of the year for Penn State in Week 5, is going to convince a lot of people that this is the best team in America, and that outside of everything going right for Georgia, Texas, and Ohio State, and maybe Alabama, because they're there talent-wise too, that unless those teams hit their absolute ceiling, which is very unlikely, that's lightning in a bottle type stuff, that Penn State is the best overall team and probably has the most realistically insane ceiling out of all of these teams. I think that Aller is going to play himself in the round one pick one conversation. Their receivers will be good enough this year where I think that at least one of their guys, don't know if it'll be Pena, Ross, or Hudson, will be able to beat any secondary in man coverage. Not all the receivers, but I think they'll be able to pass to a limited degree against anyone they want to, whereas last year against good secondaries, they couldn't pass the ball, period. They return an elite offensive line, which I think is the best in America, led by Nick Dawkins, Olivega Ione. Their defensive line, starting-wise, is up there. Depth-wise, not quite as good as Georgia, Texas, Clemson, but starting-wise, it's with those units. And they have the number one DC in Jim Knowles and the number one OC in Andy Kotelnicki. James Franklin's their only question, and I think with how good this squad is, he won't have much of a problem because his team will be the best, and he only loses to teams that are, well, better than his. And I don't think any team will be better than his this season. So moving on, and I want to talk about first Michigan and Boise State. I'm obviously picking Michigan here. Boise State's going to be outmatched. Now, they're not going to fold under the cold weather, but Michigan is just really going to be better than everything at Boise State, minus potentially wide receiver and maybe offensive tackle, and it's a home game for Michigan, so they would definitely win. It's similar logic for Ohio State at 6th, beating Utah at 11th. That would probably be a tougher game by only a little bit, but I would expect Ohio State to just quickly get on the wrestling mat, pin Utah down, break their bones, carve them up, and put them in a vat of acid. I mean, that would be a very ugly game when it's all said and done. Maybe I'm wrong there. Same with Boise State. I think that given the situations Ohio State and Michigan are in, that I could see Utah playing Ohio State close or Boise State playing Michigan close. I couldn't really see any of those teams beating those opponents on the road. I couldn't even see them playing those teams competitively within 3 scores. Close would be they hang on for 2.5, 3 quarters, and then in the fourth quarter, those teams pull away and win by 17 to 28 points. That's what close would mean in those games. Some more competitive games would be USC and Texas, 7th seed USC hosting 10th Texas, and 8th Alabama hosting 9th Miami. In the Texas-USC game, we've seen so far in the playoffs that home field advantage matters a ton. But I will also caution you all that a big part of the reason why all the home teams in the playoffs advanced to the semifinals is because Penn State, Texas, and Ohio State were your top 3 teams in America, I think, in reality, or at least definitely top 5. And Notre Dame, I don't know if they were quite there, but they were there, and they had a wonderful matchup edge where they faced Indiana, Georgia, and then Penn State, and neither of those teams had even good enough receivers talent-wise or good enough pass protection to really expose Notre Dame's defense in the way that USC and Ohio State could. It's more about power ratings than it is home field advantage, and I think that Texas is going to be power rated by double digits over USC at this point, and I think that will be more than enough to overcome USC's home field advantage. Plus, it's not like Texas is going up to Ohio Stadium or Michigan Stadium again, the Horseshoe or the Big House. They are going to an area with more similar climate. It's going to be drier, but you're at least going to have somewhat similar temperatures, and or maybe it's not going to be drier. I don't know. All I know is it's similar. It's a similar region in terms of south versus the snowier, wetter north. Probably shouldn't be talking about the weather that much. I don't know enough about the weather to go in a deep analysis there. But again, I think that snow and frigid temperatures and a massive temperature change mean more than maybe a decent difference in humidity and also a shorter distance between those two schools than other destinations Texas could travel to. So I think that Texas, having the superior roster, having the better coaching staff, being more talented overall, USC would keep it competitively, but Texas would probably lead the whole game and come out with a win. And then finally, Miami traveling to Alabama. I think Kalen DeBoer's a much better game manager than Mario Cristobal. Yes, I do think Miami will have the better quarterback play, the better offensive line play. They'll probably have better trench play overall, but that environment will be tough. And while Miami may have a slight edge in the trenches and at quarterback over Alabama, Alabama has, I think, a pretty massive edge in terms of overall talent, in terms of wide receiver talent, and also, I would say, defensive back talent. Alabama's staff is also in year 2 outside of Ryan Grubb, and Miami's staff, they've made a lot of changes on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, they gutted that defensive staff, got some new pieces in. So I think that Miami has the potential to be better than Alabama, but the power ratings will be close enough, and I do have Alabama power rated ahead of Miami to where Alabama would win this football game. Moving on, I want to discuss why I believe Oregon would beat Michigan. This is going to be more of a simple explanation than any of the other quarterfinal matchups. Michigan is a team that will be power rated much lower than their seeding, but because of a win over Ohio State where I think they match up well. I think they're going to match up much better in the trenches than they did last season, where it was kind of a fluke how badly they beat them there. Not Michigan's D-line over the Ohio State O-line, but Michigan's O-line held up exceptionally well against that Ohio State front. Ohio State loses much of that front. Michigan returns a good amount of it, and they get Ohio State at home. So therefore, they're going to be puffed up seeding-wise on top of that win over Nebraska. Oregon will be favored over them by high single digits, and I think that Oregon will very easily cover that spread. I could be wrong. Quarterback will be pretty equal. I think that Michigan will probably be a similar type of team in terms of rushing offense to Oregon, but Oregon's passing offense will be much better. Michigan will have the much better defensive front. Oregon will have the better secondary to that point, and Michigan will have the better special teams. But Lanning, we saw this before. He's a much better coach than Sharon Moore. He'll outcoach him, and I think that Oregon with a rest period is going to be much better than Michigan, especially since Michigan's going to be traveling to the Cotton Bowl. That's the location of this game. I think probably it'd be 50-50 crowd split, maybe even favorable towards Michigan with their larger fan base. But Oregon right now is, on average, more athletic, more talented, and bigger than Michigan. So I think Oregon would win this game fairly decisively. We have up next Georgia over Ohio State. This taking place in the Sugar Bowl. It's going to be a very tight game. I think it's going to be the most, or one of the more competitive games that we are going to see in this playoff. However, I think that Georgia is better on the defensive line. I think they are deeper at linebacker, and I think that they have better coaching overall on defense. I also believe that Georgia has leveled up wide receiver compared to last year, so they would be able to get some plays against this Ohio State defense through the air, and I'm betting on Georgia to really improve in rushing offense. I also think that Kirby Smart is the best game manager in America by a country mile. Ryan Day's really good. He's number 2 in my book as a head coach, but Kirby Smart's in his own tier with game management. And at that point in the year, Patricia and Hartline, look, they're first-year coordinators. Hartline isn't going to be the nation's best play caller in year 1. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so. And Patricia hasn't coached in college before for several years, and he took several years off from being a full-time defensive coordinator. So I think that Georgia's staff continuity, understanding the college game better, having better game management, and also changing up enough of their weaknesses and fixing enough of them to succeed will help them win this game. They also have much better special teams than Ohio State. Ohio State may be flashier, more explosive. That'll probably make the public be more in love with them than Georgia to win it all. But Georgia's much more fundamentally sound. Georgia's recruited better. Georgia is more talented. They're one of the few teams that is more talented than Ohio State, the only other one being Alabama. And once you factor in development, I might put Ohio State ahead of Alabama. I probably would, but Georgia's up there. So I have them winning that tight, close game. We have Texas going over Clemson, mainly because I think that Texas, at the end of the year, much like Ohio State, much like Oregon, is going to fix a lot of their issues, is going to rapidly improve. But what I like about Texas compared to those two teams in particular is A, Manning's talent, and B, their defense. I think they did a better job restocking the defensive front than either of those teams did, and I think I can trust them more at corner than both of those teams. Not at safety, because Ohio State is Caleb Downs, although I can trust them more at safety than Oregon. And they also have complete staff continuity with coordinators and head coaches. I also believe that while their offensive line, it's thin, I don't expect it consequentially to get much better at pass blocking throughout the year, because they could receive more injuries and Goosebys in a cast. I think their rushing offense with C.J. Baxter is going to get better throughout the year. And Tom Allen in year one, he's not going to be able to institute everything he wants to. And even if he does, it's not like Clemson has the defensive talent from my standpoint in terms of depth that Ohio State does, or maybe factoring in development that Penn State does. I know they got Peter Woods, TJ Parker, really talented guys up front. I'm talking, though, about their depth, some recent recruiting classes, and the fact that I think Ohio State and Penn State have developed better on defense than Clemson has in the prior few seasons, and that impacts those player rankings. It does. A 5-star, if he receives bad development, is going to be behind a 4-star who's received elite development. He just will. And Texas has leveled up in talent. They're ahead of Clemson there now. I also think that Texas has a better staff. They don't have the better quarterback, and they don't have the better receivers, but I do think that their interior offensive line and defensive line overall will match Clemson's at year's end. They'll have a better secondary, a better linebacker core, and better special teams. And I like them with their team speed and size to just edge out Clemson there, especially after Clemson wins 13 games. This is going to be the one game that they drop. We are now going on, and that's taking place in the Orange Bowl, by the way, Clemson, Texas. Penn State, Alabama is my Rose Bowl. I think Penn State will win this game pretty decisively, and that's going to be a common theme for me with picking Penn State games this year, if what I think they are is what I witness when I watch their matchups. I think Penn State is going to be better than Alabama at a variety of positions this season. Wide receiver, no. Defensive back, we'll see. I think at the beginning of the year especially, Alabama will be better there. We'll see throughout the season. Everywhere else, I like Penn State. And I like Penn State's coordinators better than I like Alabama's. Not by much, because Grubb and Womack is an amazing combo. You can't beat Knowles and Kolnicki, though. No coordinator duo is going to beat that coordinator duo. It's in the Rose Bowl. Penn State is going to have some extra time of rest. Now, with Franklin, I question if he would use that properly, of course. But I think Penn State's going to be such a good team. And they've won in the Rose Bowl before. They've been there several times with Franklin. Much of this roster has, actually, in that 2022 Rose Bowl against Utah. I think they're going to come out, they're going to play with fire, and they're ultimately going to win here. Next, I want to discuss Texas beating Georgia. So I have Georgia beating them twice already. And unlike Penn State and Oregon, where I think there is a significant power ratings difference between Penn State and Oregon, I think that for much of the year, Penn State will be a touchdown, if not more, better than Oregon, and more when you factor in matchups. I think that Penn State matches up well with Oregon. They're built a lot like Oregon, except they should be better at every position. Outside of Oregon's wide receiver 1 over Penn State's wide receiver 1, I also believe that Mateo Uiagalelei would be the best defensive end on both squads, if not tied with Denai Dennis Sutton, and he's certainly more proven than he is right now. And Isaiah World could be the best offensive tackle. Hughes, I think, would be tied for first, if not right behind Singleton. And Sadiq would be the best tight end on both teams. But depth-wise and overall unit-wise, I think that I like Penn State at almost every position over Oregon. So I can see Penn State beating Oregon 3 times, because even though it's very hard, if you have a significant edge and you're overall just the straight-up better team in a completely different tier than the team you're playing, well, you can play them again and again and again, and you'll beat them more often than not. Texas, Georgia are 2 teams that are really close, and I've given so far in my predictions Georgia benefit of the doubt because I think Smart is a much better coach than Sark. I also, though, think that Texas has more X factor players than Georgia. And Ohio State is the same thing. They have more centennial alien-like players than Georgia. I think it's the same thing with Texas. However, Ohio State and Georgia are playing each other for the first time. Texas at this point will already be familiar with Georgia, and I think Texas is going to be better on defense than Georgia and better at running the ball than Ohio State. So they will be more similar to Georgia, which I think in this situation actually could help. They'll also have better special teams than Ohio State. They will be hot coming off of wins against USC and Clemson. And I believe that with how close those teams are, I wish I could pick Georgia here because I have Georgia as the second best team in America. Penn State is the best, and Texas is my third best team. But it's hard to beat a good team twice, even harder for 3 times. And Texas has a better starting wide receiver than Georgia. Again, same thing with Ohio State. But the edges that Texas will have at the end of the year over Ohio State, which I think are running the ball, overall QB play, just defense straight up at every position outside of safety, and special teams, that will be enough to where Georgia beat Ohio State in a close game. Texas is going to beat Georgia in a close game. My national champion pick is Penn State here. I think Penn State's the best team in all of college football. I think that in this matchup against Texas, it would be closer than what they did against Alabama or Oregon or any team in the regular season outside of Ohio State. The game will be more competitive. But while Texas should have an easier time passing the football in terms of solely quarterback and wide receiver play against Penn State's DBs, Texas is a Ryan Wingo. I don't think Penn State has anyone like that. However, what I really like here is Penn State's offensive line depth. They have the deepest O-line sin maybe Notre Dame in all of college football. They could have 1 or 2 offensive linemen get hurt and their overall play there wouldn't drop off much. If the same happens with Texas, then they have a permanently lower cap than probably anyone thinks their ceiling is. Like, they drop down by several points if they have some more injuries on the offensive line than they already do. And the likelihood of that happening is high. Also, Aller's more proven than Arch Manning. We know this. I believe that Penn State has the more proven running back duo. Penn State is sneakily athletic, and sneakily tough, big, physical. Is it to the same degree as Texas or Georgia or Ohio State, at least, usually on average? No. But their defensive tackles are finally, I think, at Big Ten national title caliber size. They have good ends. Sounds like they could have a good breakout player there. And again, going back to coordinators, I think that Knowles, like he did last year, would really limit Sark to getting a few wins here and there, but overall hold him under 20 or at least under high 20s to the low 20s teens. And I think Kotelnicki would have a more favorable matchup against Pete Kwiatkowski than Sarkisian would against Knowles. Also, both Sark and Franklin each have 1 win against the FPI top 10 over the past 4 years. So the game management edge that Sark would have over Franklin is not as significant as it would be if Day were coaching against Franklin or Smart were coaching against Franklin. Heck, I even think that Lanning right now is a better game manager than Sark. I think that Sark is potentially the second best CEO in football. I think he recruits and holds on to his staff and overall does a better job of getting players to be at an NFL size and just position than almost any other coach in the country, except for maybe Kirby Smart and Ryan Day. But in this matchup, I think that Texas will have a speed advantage. Penn State will have an experience advantage. Texas will have some size advantages, but I think that Penn State will be at this point deeper than Texas. So I like the Texas Longhorns to reach the national championship, but they will fall short after playing in a dominant win potentially against USC, but more likely than not 3 somewhat close contests, and Penn State being able to run the football better, being able to stop the run at maybe a slightly worse pace, but pretty similar, and being close in pass coverage, Penn State having good enough special teams to trade bounces with Texas there, and having a more proven quarterback. much more proven offensive line. It's the biggest reason why I'd like Penn State in said matchup. So those are my playoff predictions. We have Boise State, Michigan, Miami, Alabama, Utah, Ohio State, Texas, USC, Clemson, Georgia, Penn State, and Oregon making the 2025 college football playoff. If you have any thoughts, make sure to let me know down in the comments section below. I strongly believe Penn State is the best team in college football. I think they'll win the national title this year. If I had to choose someone else, it would be Kirby Smart in Georgia. The coaching edge that Smart would have over anyone else, head coach to head coach, can't be understated. And they have the number one team talent composite roster right now, on top of, I would say, one of the best, if not the best, strength and conditioning staffs and assistant staffs. And their schedule is so much easier than it was last year, and I think their offense will be much better. Thank you for watching College Football with Sam. Make sure that you've liked the video, subscribed to the channel, hit the notification bell for the channel and team playlists and podcasts in the description, joined the free Discord server where we talk college football 24/7, and have commented your thoughts down below. Check out the description for any ways you can support the channel monetarily. Everything else I've asked you to do is completely free, and your support means the world to me. We're trying to become the next big thing on college football YouTube. 6-figure subscribers, maybe 1 million one day. I think we can do that. And also check out any videos or playlists, anything in these columns right here, where there will be videos and playlists. Yeah, you get the point. Have a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next one.